Stay close to customers, listen to customers. There's always room for people in an organization that are close to customers and connected to them.
Welcome to the Modern Selling Podcast, where we help the entire sales community to create more sales conversations with today's modern buyer. This includes anyone from entrepreneurs and business owners to sales reps and sales leaders. Each episode, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, connect, and nurture your relationships with your buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., your host, and you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Postal.io, a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing sales strategy by visiting Postal.io. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Modern Selling Podcast. I'm excited to be with you today. I've got another great guest from the field, Mr. Chris O'Brien, Chief Commercial Officer of C.H. Robinson. And, pretty interesting. Who would have known C.H. Robinson, a $16 billion, with a B, billion-dollar company? And I personally didn't even know. Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Mario, thanks a lot for having me. Really excited to be here.
So I mentioned it. C.H. Robinson is one of the best kept secrets out there, Chief Commercial Officer. And something very unique about you is, if I'm not mistaken, you've been there for 28 years?
Yeah, coming up on 28.
28 years. Now, that's a rare situation, and we'll talk about that in a little while, to see somebody at a lifetime or at an organization. And by the way, you look younger than myself. So
Well, thank you. Thank you.
The fact is you age well if you are truly there at 28 years. But that being said, do me a favor, buddy. Talk a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at C.H. Robinson, and kind of a little bit about your history and background there.
Yeah, that's great. Again, thanks for having me. You mentioned, best kept secret, and within our industry, obviously the people that buy transportation and logistics services around the world know us. But yeah, I've been here for the first billion, 28 years ago, and it's been a success. It's been a lot of fun. We are a global company in the services and transportation industry, so technology to help you get goods around the world. And we're one of the largest in this around the world. And what we really have is a platform that connects the world's shippers with the means of transportation. So anything that moves out there, C.H. Robinson's generally in that space, in that marketplace. And we've been a leader and successful. And I've been lucky to be here. I am the Chief Commercial Officer. So for us, that is really three functions: our global marketing team, our sales support, sales enablement. We've got about half of our employees are customer facing and in the field, and my team supports them with tech and strategy and messaging, SDR, anything that we can do more efficiently centralized. And then we've got a segmented market, and I have a team of direct sellers and account managers that sell to the largest companies in the world. So you mentioned, I came from the field. I've been really lucky. The company's grown up with me, and I started out in sales and account management and sales leadership. And that's, to me, a really important part of what I try to bring to the table is my knowledge of what it was like to be that salesperson. And I'm still selling every day that I can, Mario, and dealing with our largest customers. And I still pick up the phone and cold call. And that's always been fun for me. And I try to bring that expertise. So yeah, it's rare, but it's been a unique experience for me here.
I love what you said about still out there making calls and making appointments for the sellers. I actually forgot to tag you now that you mention it. Yesterday, I published a post, and we had a little competition for the week last week, and it was the sellers. And I said, well, listen, I'll join you guys. The person with the most number of appointments, gets the bragging rights. So I actually booked the most number of appointments in our mid-market enterprise space, and they all felt like, whoa, how did that just happen? And I said, you know what, you want to do double or nothing? And they said, all right, what's double or nothing? I mean, what are we putting on this? I said, all right, no money exchange here. But what we'll do here is we will own the bragging rights, and you'll get basically punishment by social media. So anybody who loses has to hold up a sign that says, I'm the biggest prospecting loser on a whiteboard. We take the picture, we put it on social media, but the one who wins gets to say, I'm the prospecting winner. So we've got a competition going, and I'm happy to say that in the enterprise space, I'm leading the charge after only a day and a half.
Nice job.
They're claiming it's unfair because you're the CEO of the company. So I said, hey man, I'm only doing this 20% of my time. You get to do it 100%. So that's the fair advantage right there.
Good for
But
you.
what I really like what you said is that as a sales leader and someone who's supporting sales as well, the larger commercial organization, the fact is that you're out there and you're still looking for those opportunities. And I would like to say that you are the company, man. Like 28 years with a company, that's a lot of knowledge built up into one person's mind right there. My guess is you're probably the longest tenure at the company on the executive team or somewhere close.
I think on the executive team I am, but I don't know where I am overall. Tenure is a really common thing here, long tenure. A lot of my peers have grown up, and we've grown. So there's always been new opportunities. There's always, new jobs and new markets. We've made a lot of acquisitions. So I think my situation is a little bit rare, but a little bit more common at C.H. Robinson. And I'm sure I'm probably not even in the top 50 right now in tenure, but I don't know exactly where it is.
I would argue too, as well, that in industries like transportation, logistics, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, and distribution, generally we see a lot more folks sticking around in positions than you see in some of the other professional services, technology type of industries, where I think people are moving constantly to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. But all right, look, we got a lot to talk about there in terms of how you had your success. But I do want to ask you this question before we go any further, and that is, tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they were looking at any or all of your social profiles. And I'm looking for something juicy, Chris. You got to give us something good.
Okay. How about something embarrassing?
Embarrassing. I'll take it. I'll take it.
I think, a lot of times you hear about somebody's adventure sports or something that's actually kind of a cool secret, but this is pretty dorky. And I don't even think I've even told my wife this, but I'm a big sports fan and I love college sports primarily. And when you get right down to it, all the way down to Michigan State University, and huge basketball and football fan there. And I grew up with a family where it was kind of, part of our family religion. And I grew so used to liking one team. So I'm just an intense fan. I watch every game that I can. And I've done this for a long time. And I sort of just caught myself, recently, and just how dumb and ridiculous it is. But when my team is behind, I start to imagine that what could I do to the other team if I were in that game? And sometimes it's, I will pretend like I'm, let's take the University of Michigan's quarterback. And I try to figure out, if I was in there, what could I do? Could I take that snap, throw it up in the air right to, a cornerback so he can run it back for a pick six? And in my head, I'm always running through this play like, all right, how am I going to get the snap off? I don't know these counts. I'm picturing myself in the huddle as this imposter, hoping that they don't recognize I'm not, the other team's quarterback. But I think it's embarrassing. And that's probably why I've never even told anybody that I'm going through these scenarios while I'm watching a game where we are behind.
Well, that brings a new dimension to sports fan, simply because you're picturing yourself in the game.
I'm looking at their faces. I'm like, all right, I know I'm going to have to come up with some play call. And I'm like, all right, let's just say, let's do that one again to see if I can get him to the line.
I'm calling an audible right now.
Follow me.
Or make sure you break the knees. No, that's good. I like that. All right. Well, I don't think I've ever gone that far. Actually, funny topic. So I am a sports watcher, and I more on the social side. Like, I'll pay attention to it. I'll watch a game. I'm not a fanatic at all. My father is. He can tell you every statistic for the 49ers dating back to as young as he was a kid, right? And every single player and Hall of Fame and blah, blah, blah. So it kind of wore me out as a kid. And when I became an adult, I was like, I love football. I played it. And so, around friends and whatnot, we'll watch it. I'll get into the game. I'll scream and yell, all that stuff, right? But just as a general rule, I think that's not something I would go to first on a weekend. My son, however, my 10-year-old, somehow the football gene skipped me and got to him. And he is a crazy fiend. And I always tell my wife, this is one thing you cannot blame on me. I did not inculcate this into his DNA, but he is a fiend for football, and that's all we do now. Talk about is football, football, football. So I'm
Yeah, that's funny.
almost my
I
dad.
got it from my father too, who was a big competitor and loved sports. But the curse he left me with was he was a one team only at a time fan. And so when it was the Olympics, it was hate the Russians and really anybody besides the Americans. And with college, it's, Michigan State and nobody else. So
That's
it's
right.
funny. I rarely watch games when my team's not playing.
All right. Well, we know you're a diehard fan. As long as you're not sleeping as we're dreaming that you're in the huddle.
I think I've had that dream.
Yeah, you've had that dream. All right. Very good. Well, let's get into this topic here. One of my favorite things to do on the Modern Selling Podcast is really to bring in practitioners such as yourself, those that are in the field, that are living, breathing, and dying into, some of the challenges that we're faced with today as a sales community, as a sales industry. And of course, we're in this pandemic era that hasn't really gone away, but it's actually probably been a good opportunity for C.H. Robinson, given the transportation side of things. Before we get into talking about, how COVID has impacted you guys and some of the things you guys have done on the sales force, do me a favor. I want to come back to this 28-year career that you've had at C.H. Robinson. Most folks that we talk to today, especially our younger generation that's coming into sales, the average lifespan is 18 to 24 months, and they're moving around company to company, position to position, and position to position may not be a bad idea, but company to company, and I see this all the time, regardless of the position, sales, marketing, anything alike. Talk a little bit about how you see settling in at a company for a length of period of time as an advantage, as opposed to a disadvantage.
Yeah, I'll start with in the previous comment. I think that tenure like this is rare in our industry as well. It is a technology industry. Our apps are more important than ever. It's a competitive space. It always has been. We have Silicon Valley in our industry, a lot of private equity. Some of our success has drawn more attractors to this model over the years. So I think that we are unique, and a lot of that has to do with growth and opportunity. For me, I've always tried to make it an advantage, because I think sometimes with being customer facing, a customer can see that as a disadvantage. And 10, 15 years ago, we would all, around the table, Chris O'Brien, have been here 15 years, and it was like a badge of honor. But today, it's a little bit more of it's so odd with how much people move around today that a customer can see it as you haven't experienced multiple organizations. And so for me, I've been in a lot of different roles. I've been in 3 different countries. And I think for all of us in the sales and customer facing world, that it becomes an advantage, because you're in front of customers, you're talking to customers, you're learning their language, you get a bit of exposure to everyone. And so I think that in many ways for anyone, it is an advantage. For me, it's been an advantage because I get to lead in a field and at a company where I did that job. I was opening up doors. I know how challenging it is to have that number on your head as a salesperson. I've led big customers. And so I try to walk the walk that I know and lead by example. And part of what I feel so fortunate about at Robinson is that I've been guiding my career and changes that I've tried to drive at C.H. Robinson based on things that I've learned, or tools, exposure, support that I wish we had when I was in that job. And our company's always done a nice job of empowering people and getting out of their way. It's very much do the right things for your customers and your career will take care of itself. But there have been things in my career that I've seen and kept in my head, hey, someday I'd like to have that opportunity to fix that. And then there's just, the connections, 16,000 people around the world. I personally know a lot of them. So when I need to drive change here, one, I can do it from experience and being able to understand the voice of a customer. There's a lot of customers I can reach out to over the years to help me with these changes, and they'll be frank with me in terms of what we need to do better. But I think that, I think the biggest advantage is for any of us is just knowing the job versus leading. And I try to lead by example and fix what I've experienced and drive change that I think really applies to the to the field at all different levels.
Yeah, when I was back at a telecommunications organization, I was originally part of the first a group that they hired, a startup company that for there for 4 years, and they invested about almost about $1 billion worth of capital. And after they decided to close it down at the dot bomb, they absorbed those that they asked to remain to stay into the mothership organization. And so overall, I ended up being there for about 14 years. But what I found for me personally was, as I wanted to move up and around, it became very difficult to be able to move up and around in a shrinking company. So when I started there was 80,000 employees. When I left, there were 40,000 employees, right? So it was a pretty big challenge to be able to move around in an organization. And what you'll find in a lot of legacy companies like that is that a lot of people do stay in those positions for quite some time. And so I think one of the best pieces of advice, though, I gave to the selling community, or what I think is good advice, and I would love to get your feedback on this just from a career standpoint, is look, before you take a jump in from one position to another or from one company to another, make sure you've proven that you've been successful in that particular role. And building that track record, regardless of whether or not you're within a company or you're moving from company to company, is super important. And I think a lot of the younger salespeople today don't understand the value of building that track record. Sure, might you go from BDR to senior BDR from one company to another? Yes, or maybe it's account executive to senior account executive, and maybe there's a 20K bump in base, whatever the number is. But do you have the track record to prove that you can actually succeed from company to company, position to position, organization to organization? And I think I think a lot of our sellers need to be reminded of that. Same thing with leaders as well.
I think that's a really good point, Mario. I agree 100%. And to go back to my situation, I think that's even easier to prove internally. That
100%.
people have seen that you've driven that success, and it can be proved where when you're in a job interview, you are trying to get their trust that success happened and will be meaningful in the next job. So everyone's got a different path. It's not for everyone, but for me, I think it's been primarily about the great company that I got lucky to find, and that we've made the right decisions to really see this industry grow up with our model.
Yeah. And I tell our sellers today, when they came on board, you give me 2 years and I'll get you to wherever it is that you want to go. Right. That's the minimum commitment. 2 years. I promise you'll get to where you want to go. And if I have to personally place a phone call for you, I'll do it, even if you're working here with me. So that's our best advice out there to all of our sales leaders and sellers listening in. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that your sales force has faced. Obviously, COVID has impacted companies and sales in a lot of different ways, some positive, some negative. What have you seen as the impact to C.H. Robinson and your particular sales force?
Yeah, so COVID was obviously, for us being in global supply chains, it was a really disruptive event. When the lockdowns happen and back in March. The fortunate thing for us is we have 120,000 customers across most every different industry vertical. Some of them were really struggling. Auto shut down. Food was switching from our food distribution and restaurants over to the retail space. So some things were blowing up, and some customers were just flat out closed. Overall, but then it drove need for, importing PPE and getting medicine and, food on shelves everywhere. So for us as an industry, the supply chain became a little bit more easy for everyone to understand. It was front page news. My wife was talking about, reading about supply chain, and it was in all the headlines as how important it is. From a sales standpoint, we immediately looked at it and said, this can be an advantage. And I think that was an important choice that we made early on. Another thing that we did was we decided we would treat this change as permanent. In order to really maximize what was going on in the world, we would act as if some part of this was going to continue. Our company did a really nice job of overnight getting everyone working remotely, and that all that tech worked. But we had the advantage, I think, of being primarily, we're B2B sales, primarily starting with digital marketing, SDR support, and inside sales. Our first attempt is almost always a phone call, not a live meeting. So we probably had some advantages in that our approach worked as well, but we adjusted right away. We adjusted our sales messaging. Things, as people were dealing with this, you were either looking to do more with less, people were trying to cut costs, people were looking to outsource, which is a big part of our business. So, our messaging, we wanted to resonate with what was going on in the COVID environment, and we immediately, changed that. We jumped headfirst into the tech and really embraced video and video selling and live video selling primarily. And we were relatively new to Teams, and we said, okay, this is going to be, again, to go back to treating this as permanent, we knew that some component of this was going to stay forever. We will get through COVID someday, hopefully as soon as possible. But every company in the world has learned a lesson that, hey, we can function a little bit more remotely. The lack of travel expense that's no longer in everybody's comparable is going to drive some amount of companies having more of a willingness to embrace remote selling. So personally, I can't wait to get back to face-to-face. I've had one live sales call since March, and I definitely made sure that after that sales call, the first time I'd been with Robinson people from different parts of the country, we're like, all right, we are going for happy hour before anybody jumps back on that plane. And in 8 months, one live call. So I personally, as an extrovert, can't wait. But we wanted to help the salespeople as much as possible. So we jumped right away on training do's and don'ts, the good, bad, and the ugly of showing up on video. We tested new technology. We really made sure that we were doing anything that we could to make this fun, to keep the world, connected. And, we have a pretty nimble culture, so driving that change wasn't, that much of a challenge. But again, I think we had a good baseline from which to change by having an approach that was primarily starting with inside sales.
So you mentioned a number of things, and part of it was leadership mindset. And the mindset had to be that, look, change is happening and we need to pivot, and we need to pivot fast and think about this, that some of this is going to be permanent in some way. And the companies, I think many companies, to your point, have realized, oh my gosh, I could actually run my business on a fully virtual company or an organization, everybody working from home, which has triggered other types of activities in addition to travel savings. Many companies have said, well, I don't need this much real estate. Right. Companies like REI that gave up their whole entire campus that they built for that they never even moved into. Actually, I think they were supposed to move into it in April, if I'm not mistaken, and they couldn't move into it, so they decided they were going to sell the whole thing off and go virtual. I think that's one extreme, but there's some happy middle ground, I think, for many organizations. So I love what you said about really looking at this from a leadership perspective and looking at this as a permanent change or some component of permanent change, and adjusting your messaging and trialing things in terms of technologies. I think a lot of leaders who are listening in right now are still not getting the support that they need from senior leadership to leverage these types of things. For example, we know that video is the hottest thing out there right now, both face-to-face, synchronous, as well as asynchronous communications. And it is an area that many sellers have not leveraged fully. And it is a channel that, quite frankly, is still getting some really high positive responses when done professionally and tactfully. So talk a little bit about, how do you get the senior leadership team to drive the change or accept the change or to invest in the sales organization, especially for companies who may be impacted and they can't see that they have that money?
Well, yeah, first of all, I think it gets easier in a situation like this. Everybody immediately sees what's happened. We need to adjust to this new reality. We need to be able to sell differently in this COVID environment. And again, some part of this will be permanent. So what else can we change? I think it starts with company culture. And driving change has been a big part of what I've tried to do for my whole career, is drive customer-centric change to support our customers and our people facing them. And I've been fortunate because driving improvement at C.H. Robinson has never felt like swimming upstream. We are, like I said, we were a relatively small company when I started 28 years ago. We've always have a self-critical approach to change and what can we do better. So I think what the biggest thing we built was a culture that was ready for change. And it's nice if you have a nice change management department, but it's more important if you have a culture that's just ready to go. And I think the first component is owning it and living it. And, I mentioned being able to walk the walk our first couple of weeks of trying to adjust to everything that was going on of, global supply chains disrupted, a sales force now selling. We were doing quarterly business reviews and videos now. And I just participated in those and watched and saw, the first thing we did is we did a, sort of a good, bad, and the ugly. And I did it myself. Here's here's a way that I've seen these go wrong. Here's a better way. And I think owning that, I think the biggest component to change isn't your culture or your change management department. It is your own personal commitment to say, I see this as a challenge. I will personally commit to coming up with the solution versus this is a problem. What are we going to do about this? I think that's too common of an approach. And again, it's helped that I've been at a company that's always ready to improve and listen to customers and get ourselves, make sure that our internal structure is not getting in the way. But to me, the most important component is leadership commitment.
Love what you said specifically around your personal commitment and owning it personally. I want to drill down on that topic, and that really requires sales leadership to pivot and to really get involved and look for the solution, not just say, go find the solution. And so I want to drill down into that on some of the things that you did specifically. And I heard you rattle off a few things like looking at the QBRs and seeing how to actually perform it and what would actually be a better workflow. I want to go one step further and drill down into some of the other things that you've done as a leader so that you were actually in the trenches with the field getting this done. But before we do that, I want you all to listen to this very important message from our program sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Postal.io, a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Postal allows you to automate and personalize your offline outreach to both existing customers and new prospects at scale. Learn how you can easily integrate direct mail, gifts, charitable donations, and even alcohol into your existing sales, marketing, and retention strategies. Visit Postal.io today and request a demo so you can boost your pipeline and close more deals. Right before that break, I was talking about the need for pivoting as sales leaders and our individual role in driving change. You mentioned things like, hey, I needed to own it rather than delegate it. I started doing and being part of the solution as opposed to saying, go find the solution. Can you drill down on some of these other things? For example, so I know that you started a video sales training internally, amongst many other things. Talk a little about some of these examples of what you did. And you said you just wrestled that bull by the horns down to the ground and just said, we're going to do this and we need to do this. And I'm going to be the leader in the front trying to help. Talk a little bit about that and maybe use the example of video.
Sure. Well, again, I think we can overcomplicate things too often in business, and I like to simplify them and, again, show by example. We have a ton of great people in the field doing great things. As we were experiencing, we'll start with video, synchronous video, and Teams is primarily what we're using. I just decided, a lot of people could point out, wow, these some of these are going great, some of these are terrible. So instead of just pointing, we said, let's just create something and let's use ourselves. We'll be the actors. And we created a series. And, again, it's not all that complicated, but what are the great things that we see? What are the things to avoid? The next time, to go back to how can we make this environment an advantage? One advantage with video is that we have experts in all these different modes of transportation everywhere in the world. It's never been easier to bring them into your customer meeting. You're not trying to fly everyone around the world to Atlanta anymore. So the next thing we did is let's just show an example of people that brought experts into their meetings and how easy that was. Little things like we immediately invested in great backgrounds for employees that wanted that and how to use them. So we got really basic. And again, I think that's the important part. We brought leadership into this series. It's still continuing. We got another one going out next week that's being recorded today. again, I think people want to see leadership participate, show your example of what you've seen. And it's just it's also been a nice way to connect with the sales force. Again, in this COVID world, we are all more isolated. We aren't used to working from home. So let's increase the rhythm and the ways that we connect with our people. And let's do it in the technology that they're using to connect with our customers today.
I love what you said. So the post that I was referring to earlier in the podcast, it's out there, and I tagged a few executive, Marcus Jewell, the chief sales officer and EVP of Juniper Networks, and he wrote back on the message post. I mean, on the comments, he goes, "Man, this is a great idea. I'm in. I'm going to reserve some time this week to do this myself, starting with our suppliers. How many appointments do you want from me, and by when do I have to have it done?" Right. So as you think about that, what you said is we've got to be able to show the field that we're in it with them. And something interesting, and I've said this before on my podcast, something interesting happened to me as a leader that I had never thought about and had never happened to me before. Obviously, in terms of COVID, nobody's ever had this happen to them in their lifetime practically. But a few months ago, one of our folks reached out to me. It was late their time. It was well after midnight, and it was like 10 o'clock my time. They happened to see me on instant message and chat. And so they said, "Hey, can I reach out to you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So the individual called me up and I said, "What are you doing? Like, why are you working right now?" Anyway, so he said, "Well, I just got to take care of something." So he told me what his problem was. And I said, "Okay, well, this is, what I think you should probably do." And blah, 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 blah. And then I said, "Hey, by the way, why don't you just turn off? Like it's time to turn off." And he said to me something very interesting that I thought, wow, I really never thought of it from his perspective. And he says, "Listen, man, I really appreciate you asking me all the time, to kind of turn off and find some work-life balance. I do appreciate that. But I need you to understand from my perspective. From my perspective, I'm single. I haven't been with anybody for over 6 months. I haven't hugged a single person. I haven't even touched a single person. So the fact is I'm depressed. And if I lie in bed, I'm going to get more depressed. So I'm going to work till I'm tired, and then I can actually fall asleep. And I can't go out. I can't go to the gyms. I can't do anything else. It is what it is. So do me a favor. The more you ask me to stop working, it really frustrates me because that's the only thing that's keeping me from being depressed." And then he said, "And by the way, I know this might be hard for you to understand, but you've got your wife and you've got your 2 kids. I don't." And so I just thought, wow, like I never really thought about that. And that really kind of captured the point that I'm trying to make is that we cannot be in the ivory tower. We've got to be in the field, whether it's emotionally or whether it is practically or whether it's tactically or, in the weeds, if you would, in some cases. And I think a lot of leaders have not pivoted to do that. And I think that's they're really doing themselves wrong and the sales team wrong. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I think what it highlights is that, we talked about remote working and how much of this will be permanent. We see going forward that there'll be more remote working than there used to be, but an office environment's important. And that example you just shared is one reason that it is important is you create a culture in an office environment, you interact with each other, and you can create a common culture across multiple locations. And your work from home example is very different than that gentleman's work from home situation, right? For many people, they thought this is, somewhat a relief. I'm getting more done. My commute's gone. For others, it's a very isolating world. And I personally get pretty concerned with the mental health of the sales organizations of the world today. Not just sales, but if you think about extroverts, used to travel more. And I put myself in that state. I would never choose to travel on my own the amount that I used to, but I clearly miss it. And I probably am, maybe in the top 20%, but not the top 10. And so our top sellers that are used to being around the world, that is part of, their biorhythm that they are used to. And engaging with the customer in video is just different. So I think that's another reason that we have to find this balance and that we have to find ways to connect with our sales forces today and really all of our remote employees. At least at Robinson, we're all used to engaging across the desk, talking in the hallways. That's not that an unusual of a situation. Today, we're trying to create as many things as we can just to engage. And Yesterday, I had an online lunch. It was a part of a charity auction. Buy lunch with the Robinson executive, and I bought one with with a peer of mine. Ironically, who I talk to every day, but I just thought it'd be fun and in a simple way for me to make a contribution. And there was a relatively new field sales rep and a sales management leader, in a new reorganization where he is now managing a sales force versus an office location, and he's got a remote working force that for the first time. And it was really funny how much those two dialogued with each other. Hey, what are you seeing you need more from your sales management? And it started out, I think all of us wrote down 2 different books from each other, and different, we got into podcasts and family stories, and it was just a really fun 90 minutes. And my reflection was, well, I want to do more of that. I want to do more of that with my team. But just everybody's ability, for people, not all of whom know each other, and one you didn't know, any of us, really had a lot of fun engaging in life, in learning, and in the job. And it was, nobody had to think of like the next subject to talk about. And to me, there's something in that we need to do more of as we continue to deal with this scenario that we're in.
Yeah, and to your point, the portion that will remain permanent is that there will be many of our sales folks who choose to work from home because it works really, really well for them.
Right.
And most companies are going to say, no problem, because that's less real estate that I need to be able to house for you as an individual. So it's a potential win-win, but it doesn't change the fact that I believe that sales leadership and sales leaders will need to become much more of the individual who can talk to on an emotional level, not just work through specifically items to get the deal closed. Like we've got to be able to relate to our people. And if you weren't doing it live and in person, how much more so we need to be doing it now in a virtual environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the other changes that you've driven at C.H. Robinson, talk about that, especially in this pivot. We talked about video. Obviously, you guys were getting your folks up digitally, making sure we got everybody out with all the tools and technology that they needed to be able to be remote workforce. Talk about some of the other changes that you've done.
Well, maybe I'll start pre-COVID. We've got a long track record of trying to make this the best place to sell in the industry. And that focus has been on making the salesperson and the account manager's job the most efficient. And we're a year and a half into our first commercial off the shelf CRM, for a company of our size and level and, size of sales and customer facing employee count. We're probably pretty late to that game. But we're ahead of pace. We're, again, about a year and a half into Microsoft Dynamics. It's going well. But, previous to that, I spent a lot of time building out an internal CRM, and not a choice I'd ever make again to do it that way. But I think it helped us in learning what we would want. How do we want to handle this RFP? What do we want out of the technology? We've been investing in SDR support. And I'll come back to that with more recent technology, but new roles that we have that help the sales force not have to deal with multiple departments. We call it deal desk, but sort of quarterbacks for them in larger deals. So again, over the long term, it's been about making that job better, more enjoyable. Again, like I said, we've all been there, and it can be lonely. It is a challenge. So, again, I feel lucky to have been able to make those changes. More recently, you mentioned asynchronous video. We have been experimenting with asynchronous video. I would say our results have been mixed. We're kind of finding the sweet spot for it. The tool itself is great. The technology is great. The idea is great. We're just trying to find the best place for it. We primarily use it with our SDR team that's warming up opportunities for the team. We've been putting it in the middle of our cadence versus at the beginning. It's somewhat hard to get someone who doesn't know you to open up an email, let alone have them watch the video. So for us, it also takes time to personalize those videos and compared to our other ways in the cadence. So again, that's where we try to put it midstream when someone's engaged a little bit more. So again, we haven't done it for initial outreach as much, but we have been testing it. I would say the jury is still out, but we've learned a lot. We're using it for bigger companies, in that we can customize a video for an account and then personalize it for person and save a little bit of time. We've learned that what you put in that thumbnail is really important. What they see right away. We've been experimenting with fun things like call me signs, and people have been putting the customer's product in there. I'm eating the pasta for the company that I'm calling. And, because I think, that's the last thing that we've learned from it, is that it's good to have fun with it. And, the whole reason you did this was to be a little bit more authentic and control your message. Because we've had to be careful from some of the feedback. If you do it right, you get a lot of great anecdotal feedback. That was so funny, and I love that. So we're trying to compare that with the overall evidence of our close rates and our open rates. But again, to me, the biggest component of it is, compared to email, it is, you don't have to guess someone's passion with video. You don't have to guess what they meant. And our people are having a lot of fun with it. We're trying to keep them short. We're trying to keep them within 30 seconds. But to us, it's maybe not the magic bullet yet, but it's a part of the process, and we're trying to find the right place for it. That's one of the current technologies that we're have already invested in.
I love it. Even as a small business, my motto is sales is king. We remove off anything administratively weighing down our sales organization, remove it as much as possible. And so as of most recently, our sales team feels like 90% of their time is spent on actually selling activities. Now, it doesn't remove the administrative component of actual sales account management, meaning I had a call, I now need to put my notes into my CRM and build my task out to figure out what I'm going to do. And the follow-up on sending out that asynchronous video communication with all the different attachments, or doing the proposals, like that's not admin work, that's sales work, right? But anything administrative related, fixing CRM, tracking, assigning it to the new person, routing things over, contracts, the administrative process of putting it into the finance system, gone. Like all those things gone. We need to remove those things off of our sellers' time and focus them just squarely on selling. So it's your deal desk. Love that idea. The SDR support and some of the tools and technologies. That's interesting. New CRM only a year and a half ago that you implemented.
Yeah, I caught myself. I was going to sales conferences and learning about sales tech, and I knew that we were behind maybe 4 or 5 years ago. When you walk up to the vendor that has some type of plugin and like, which CRM are you on? We only work with this one. I'm like, none of them. So
homegrown. Sorry.
You don't have a plugin for us, but again, although it was not. I do think we learned something from struggling to build our own. And in the end, we wanted to take some of our own medicine, trust the experts in supply chain, trust the experts in sales technology. And it's really been great. That combined with just support is, like you said, we've gotten the sales force to be more efficient. The numbers are up. It's a better place to sell. It went from a great place to an even better place. And our sales force has been happy with getting the internal stuff out of their way and in hands of people that are actually better at it and love doing some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely correct. We're running out a little bit short on time here. So just a couple more questions for you. Career advice. What career advice do you have for those that are just starting out in sales? And I think you're well positioned to give some advice here, given your position, your authority in the marketplace, and your longevity at C.H. Robinson as well. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, thank you, Mario. First, I would say congratulations, because I think it is the best place to enter business. Is my father. I started, I talked earlier about my dad was in sales, and I'll start with his advice. It was stay close to revenue. And what he was saying is, stay close to customers, listen to customers. There's always room for people in an organization that are close to customers and connected to them. What I think I've learned is to think like your customer, and a sales job really helps you do that. I was on site at a customer. I handled, investor relations for Robinson, or participated in that. And that component of selling and making your company sound easy to the outside world and to a customer became a part of my language. So I was always, get rid of the acronyms. I'm so proud of Robinson, but your customers really don't care. It's get to what they care about. And I think that first step for me was walking in their footsteps about what they really want out of the engagement. I saw something early on in my career that they studied the connection between overall success and different factors in what they could find in common in testing very successful, might have been CEOs. And the thing that rose to the top each time was vocabulary. And I thought, that's strange. Are they reading vocabulary books? But they found that the correlative was reading, which I think the reading correlative is curiosity and learning. And so when I'm in front of new employees at C.H. Robinson, we do hire a lot right out of as undergrads, is that your education hasn't stopped. Keep reading books, listen to podcasts, be curious. Then the last thing I would say to them is, do not worry about your career, not worry about that next promotion. That take care of your customers, your teammates, and your career will take care of itself. And if people have challenged it, people can challenge you and say, well, once you're a leader, that seems easy to say. But as I reflected on my career path, I don't recall ever putting together a plan for a promotion. I had plans for customers and developing others. And I think people just notice if you're in it for them or if you're in it for yourself. And it's somewhat counterintuitive when you just start your job, especially at a big company, you're thinking about that next promotion. And I just haven't seen that be as helpful for people.
You rattled off a lot of things in that one. I'm going to roll it back to you. Think like your customer. And I always tell our sellers, what would the customer say if they received this? All right. What would they say? Put yourself in their shoes. Be curious, you said. Keep reading, keep listening. Like to podcast as an example. Stay close to revenue. I love that one. Stay close to revenue. And your career will take care of itself if you do those other things that you just mentioned. Great advice from Mr. Chris O'Brien. Chris, if people want to connect with you, is the best way through Twitter, LinkedIn? What's the best way?
LinkedIn or Twitter. LinkedIn's Messenger is probably the easiest.
So make sure when you reach out to Chris O'Brien, we'll put his actual URL inside of the show notes for this show here. But it's Chris O''Brien, Chief Commercial Officer at C.H. Robinson. And please, 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 when you send him that personalized message request, please tell him that you heard him on the Modern Selling podcast so he knows that you actually listen to the podcast. And last and final question for you, Chris, is your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
I've got a lot. I'm a bit of a movie buff, but I would say my favorite is Raising Arizona.
Raising Arizona. All right.
It's a tie between Raising Arizona and The Big Lebowski. So pick a Coen Brothers movie. I'm in Minneapolis where they grew up, and those two are classics to me.
We'll put those into the show notes for those that are looking for them. I appreciate you being on the show here. Don't turn that dial just yet. We've got this very important message for you right here. Don't forget to visit postal.io to learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing strategy. Postal.io is a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a rating and review on iTunes. I would appreciate it. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to themodernsellingpodcast.com. Hey, since you'll be on our site, be sure to check out our Modern Marketing Engine podcast hosted by my co-founder and CMO, Bernie Borges. Thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.